You know how sometimes the great books of history, those foundational texts, can feel like they're locked away behind glass? Like they're museum pieces we're supposed to admire but not really touch? Well, today, we're going to explore a pretty radical idea. What if the best way to really connect with these texts isn't about finding answers, but about filling them with our own questions?
Okay, so let's jump right in with the core idea from our source material. The author, who goes by Joblin, shares this incredible personal habit, saying, "Years ago, I got into the habit of reading books as a question. My books are full of question marks." Just imagine that for a second. Picking up a book not to just soak up its wisdom, but to actively challenge every single line. It's a total shift in how you think about reading. So, why is this shift such a big deal? Well, because a lot of us were taught to see texts like the Bible as this big book of final, unchangeable answers. And when a text is treated like its absolute, unshakable dogma, it can feel, well, kind of distant, right? Almost alienating. There's not a lot of room left for our own thoughts, our own doubts, our own lives. It basically shuts down the one thing that makes learning so powerful, our own curiosity. But here's the thing. There is another way. Instead of just accepting these ancient statements, we can actually transform them into questions that pull us right into the conversation. And this is really the heart of it. A statement gives you certainty. Boom, end of discussion. But a question? A question invites curiosity. It demands that you get involved personally. Questions don't end conversations, they're the very thing that starts them. All right, let's actually see how this works. Let's take some of the most famous lines ever written and put this method to the test. And, we have to start at the very beginning. There it is, Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. I mean, talk about a definitive statement. It's echoed through thousands of years, presented as the final word on how everything began. But what happens if we refuse to see it as the end of the story? And just like that, you see the method in action. Suddenly, the text isn't a wall, it's a doorway. What was in the beginning? Was it the word, like a divine command? Or was it just a sentence? Or, to get really provocative, was it propaganda, a story crafted for a very specific reason? The text just comes alive with possibilities. Okay, let's try this on another one. A rule that feels about as absolute as it gets. You shall not kill. Seems pretty simple, right? So black and white. But is it really? The second you turn it into a question, all the complexity comes rushing in. Should one never kill? What about self-defense? What about war? What about animals or even plants? Suddenly, this simple command holds a whole universe of ethical dilemmas that this statement by itself just papers over. And the uncertainty here, it actually goes even deeper. Because it turns out, even this foundational list of rules isn't as solid as you might think it is. I mean, just look at this. Depending on whether you're reading the Luther Bible or using an evangelical catechism, the second and third commandments are totally different. What one tradition calls the second commandment, another calls the third, and what's in there changes too. It's a pretty stunning example of how even the rules are really a product of interpretation. So this all leads to a really powerful question. If the commandments themselves can shift and change depending on who's telling the story, then which values are actually fixed? And who gets to decide that? A question like that forces us to move way beyond just blind acceptance. And this method, it's not just for talking about cosmic creation or ancient laws. It's also an incredible tool for turning the text inward, for questioning our own thoughts, our own motivations. You see this in the Sermon on the Mount, where the focus shifts big time. We get this line, anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Whoa. All of a sudden, the moral playing field isn't just about our actions anymore, it's about what's going on inside our heads. And this opens the floodgates to some seriously powerful questions. Do we stray in our thoughts? Which thoughts actually set us free? Is hell really other people? Or are we hell for someone else? And of course, there's that classic challenge. Why are we so obsessed with the tiny speck in someone else's eye when we're ignoring the giant log in our own? The text becomes a mirror, forcing us to really look at ourselves. So what's the end game here? With all this questioning, are we supposed to find the one true answer? Well, our source suggests the goal is something way more profound than that.
See, the point isn't to tear the text apart or to find one perfect conclusion. The real point is the process itself. It's all about changing reading from a monologue that's being dictated from the past into a living, breathing, lifelong conversation, one that we get to be a part of, right here and right now. And that's not just okay, it's actually beautiful. As Joplin writes, sometimes answering a question takes a lifetime. The most important questions aren't the ones we can Google and get an answer to in 5 seconds. They're the ones we live with, the ones that shape us and guide us for years and years. And so we end right here with a question about questions. Is there more value, more life, more truth packed into a really powerful question than there is in a simple answer? Now that is a question worth thinking about long after this is over.